pretty quickly.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll just wait one more minute to let everyone in, and then we'll begin our webinar. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Wong. I am the marketing director for Wild Women Expeditions, and I am your moderator for tonight. Tonight's webinar is all about horseback riding. So a couple of housekeeping rules. You are free to answer or ask any questions that you can through the Q&A box throughout the presentation. If your question is pertaining to the topic that we're currently speaking about, we will answer that as soon as we can. If it is a question that we'll be talking about, we'll answer everything at the end of the webinar after our presentation. And any questions that we don't get to, we promise to email you or call you as soon as we can so that we can get answers for all of your questions. And just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. So if you do need to jump off or you know someone who's missing the webinar, we will be sending out the link to the recording right after. So tonight for our panelists, we have Caroline Owen, who is our Community Engagement Manager. And we have Helen Douglas, who is an equine veterinarian and our WWE consultant.
I'm going to do a little test.
Oh, and Helen was having a couple of technical issues, so she's just back on with us now. Klein, if you want to go for it, let's begin.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I'll just say to Helen, you want to make sure you're muted on one or the other of your devices so that we don't hear you on both. So hi, everybody. I'm Klein and or Caroline Owen. I go by both. So Klein is sort of my nickname, and many of you will know me by that name, but Caroline Owen is my official name. And I've been on personally many of the horse trips, almost all of them at this point. And so I want to share a little bit about that with you. So first of all, why would you join a trip with Wild Women Expeditions? So we have several different options of course trips. We're always kind of switching it up to keep it fresh. But the main thing with joining a Wild Women trip is the atmosphere and the community that you get. So there's a sense of shared leadership, there's a sense of empowerment, there's a sense of inclusion, and all of the trips, not just the horse trips, bring that aspect to it. But when you join a Wild Women trip, you're not just joining for the activity, you're joining for the environment as well. And we absolutely love that aspect of our trips. So where do we go horseback riding? So we go, as you can see, all over the world. And as I said, we do switch it up from time to time to keep things fresh. But right now we have trips in Canada, in Peru, in Iceland, Ireland, in Portugal, actually in the Azores, which are islands off of Portugal, in Scotland, in Mongolia, and in India. You can see them nicely spread out there. So the first one I want to talk about tonight, and we're going to talk about four trips a little bit more in detail tonight, and then we'll just kind of mention the other trips at the end. So the first of the ones that I want to focus on tonight is the Golden Circle Riding Adventure, which is in Iceland, and this is one of my babies. I've done this trip many times and absolutely love it. And here you can see one of the most epic scenes that we witnessed there going in towards the Valley of the Horses on, I think, day 3 of the trip. And it's absolutely gorgeous scenery, beautiful. And I have a video for you here, but we've been trying to get the video sound working and it hasn't been working for us. So I'm going to play the video because it's mostly just a scenery anyway. There's not much to hear. There's some music in the background. So you get a sense of the horses running on the beach. This is our last day on the Iceland trip, and we get to do a little cantering for those who are up for it, or tolting or trotting on the beach. Oops. So here are some scenes from the trip. So it's not all beach riding. If you see the top left-hand corner here, these grassy sort of paths through the grass are really common. They're made by sheep tracks, and then the horses follow those paths, and they can get quite deep actually. And so we tend to pick the ones that look the nicest as we go. You'll see on the bottom left the orange rain gear. It does rain quite a bit in Iceland, so you get that to look forward to. But then if you look at the next picture, you also get the rainbow. And this picture is actually the view from one of our huts. So we have the horses right there. We're looking out over the horses, and there's often rainbows. And in the next slide, you'll actually see the sunset from that same location. It's absolutely beautiful. Can see more beach riding here. Here's Our Ladies from last year, bottom right, just outside the guest house. So that's sort of where we begin and end the Golden Circle trip. We have a couple of nights at the main farm in a nice little guest house, and then we spend 3 nights out in huts. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. We also do a little bit of sightseeing. So the top left is Gullfoss, which is one of the biggest waterfalls in Iceland. The top right is the picture I promised you with the sunset that we see from the hut. And the bottom is a spa day, which is a really nice, it's not in the official itinerary, but we always try to make it there if we can. So it's close to the hut, and it's nice because we don't have a shower for 3 nights. So it's really nice to get over to the spa. And as you can see, it's on a lake. So there's lots of hot and cold therapy options there. So a little bit about the trip itself. So skill level that's required for this trip. So first of all, I want to say that none of our horseback riding trips do we really want anyone to be an absolute beginner, right? So if you're coming on a horse trip, it's important that you've done some riding before. For this trip, we call it novice to intermediate. So novice means you've done some riding, you're more than a beginner, but you're not quite yet at that intermediate level. And so that means that you're comfortable walking and trotting on a horse, but you're not necessarily confident to go cantering off. And that's perfectly fine for this trip. Now, that said, if you are a more confident rider, then you'll have chances to canter and maybe even gallop. So we always have opportunities most days to split the group. And so those who want to go a little faster can. And so you can have the experience that you like. Fitness level, you want to be able to sit in the saddle for 4 to 6 hours. That doesn't mean that you have to practice by riding for 4 to 6 hours at a time, but know that you will be in the saddle. We take breaks every hour to 2 hours at the most, so that the horses get a chance to eat and we get a break for our butts. The thing with this trip is there is some leading of horses, and you're going to be walking, holding the horse, leading it up and down quite steep hills. And so you want to make sure that you feel confident and you've got good rugged shoes for that part, so that you're not slipping and sliding on the hill. The riding style is Icelandic, which is a little bit different from probably, unless you've ridden Icelandic, it's going to be different from anything you've done before, but it's most similar to riding English. So you're in an English type saddle, English type bridle and reins, and then there's just a few little extra pieces to work on getting the tolt, which is the gait, the famous gait of the Icelandic horse, which is kind of like a running walk, and it's very smooth, very comfortable when you can get the horse to do it. So, but you'll learn all that on the road, on the way, on the trail, and yeah, and it's really a lot of fun. So as I said, the type of horse is Icelandic, and Julia, you might notice I painted the picture here to show that there's a variety of colors, and they're all small-ish. So if you know horse measurements, 14 hands to about 15 or 16 hands. 16 would be a very big Icelandic horse. So they're very small. They're very comfortable. They're super friendly. They love to cuddle. They're not, in general, very spooky. They have no natural predators. They're a closed herd. They only have Icelandic horses in Iceland, and they don't vaccinate their horses. So if So we have to be very careful about what we bring in, disinfecting everything that we bring in, like our boots and clothing, only new gloves, that kind of thing. And if a horse ever leaves Iceland, they can't come back. And no other horse can come into Iceland at all. So it's a closed herd. They're beautiful. Like I said, they're all different colors, very friendly, and they have these big bushy manes. They're quite lovely. The accommodations on the right, these are the two huts. So the outside of the hut on the top left is different from the pictures of the inside of the hut. So there's two different huts you're seeing here. So the hut where you're seeing the inside, this is sort of one of my favorite places in the world. It's called Kringlemýri Hut. And it's this cozy hut. As you can see, we've got on the bottom right here, the bunks are kind of all in a row. They're quite comfy beds. They're all in a row on the bottom, and then above there's another layer all in a row. And then across from the bunks is the table that you see here. And there's a picture in the top right looking down from the top bunks to the table. It's so cozy. There's no electricity. There's one toilet, one sink. It's outside. And so you're away from it all. You really can't see anything man-made, human-made from the hut. So it's, like I said, one of my most favorite places in the world. All right, so that is the Golden Circle tour, and I'm going to move on to Magic of Marwar. And I could talk all night about each of these trips, so I'm trying to keep it really concise and give you the highlights. So the Magic of Marwar is in India, and I just had the pleasure of doing this tour in November, and it was the first time that we've run it, and it was an absolutely fantastic tour. It is a tour that is more suited for intermediate riders, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And I want to show you again, you won't hear the video sound, but you're going to see what the riding is like, and you'll see that it's a little more dynamic. Well, actually, the Golden Circle tour, it looked like we were going pretty fast too, but normally on the Golden Circle, we're not going quite as fast as we did in the video. But in this trip, we are doing a lot of cantering, and it's a lot of open ground, so you'll get a flavor for that here. So the tracks are really nice to ride on. They're soft. There's some quite open. The horses are fantastic. But if this looks exciting to you, going at a canter across the desert, then you might want to think about this one. All right, so here's a few more images from the trip. The unique thing, and the top left picture shows this really nicely, the ears of the Marwari horse. They have these super cute curved ears, and they kind of turn like this when you're riding, and the view from between those ears is quite spectacular. They're extremely well trained. They're incredibly calm horses. At the same time, they have a lot of spirit and a lot of spunk. So they live in India, they've heard it all, they've seen it all, and they don't get spooked by much at all. But they've got a lot of energy, and they're really fun horses to be around. They're quite friendly as well. The middle bottom picture, you'll see we do a leopard safari. So that was us from the Jeep looking out with the binoculars looking for leopards, and we did see some. We went out twice. We saw some in the evening, and we saw some the next morning as well. So for this one, as I said, it's intermediate riders. So you want to be comfortable at a canter outside. You want to be able to get on a horse and canter off on open ground on a forward horse, and that feels exciting and fun to you. And if that feels scary to you, this might not be quite the right trip for you. So again, it's about 4 to 6 hours of riding a day. We do take a fantastically long, luxurious lunch break on this trip, like 2 to 3 hours, and spread out under a tree and have lots of cold drinks and naps and that kind of thing. It gets quite hot during the day, so that 2 to 3 hour break is absolutely necessary. We ride quite a long way each day, 25 to 35 kilometers, so we do have to keep moving. to make that distance, especially if we're taking that nice big long break in the middle. It's English style riding, but the horses do some neck reining as well. It's it's sort of a hybrid style. The saddles are called cavalry saddles. They're not super comfortable, but they do have a padding on them. For this trip, I'd say to maybe bring some bike shorts just to add a little extra padding for those saddles. But they're quite comfortable in the seat, but they're just a little bit hard. And yeah, so you have a few more pictures here of the Marwari horses. This one on the left at sunset at one of our desert camps. And then on the right, you'll see the tent camps that we stayed in. So they actually set these up and tear them down every day. They bring all of these tents from place to place. There's about 30 people who support the trip. In the background, we don't even see most of them most of the time. They're just scuttling around. And I don't think there's a picture of it unless that's under the top right there. No. So the bathrooms are luxurious in these tents. They have flush toilets and a little basin that you can have a bucket bath, and they bring you hot water right to your tent every day, morning and evening. So the food is fantastic. It's just an amazing experience to stay in these tent camps. And we're often arriving right at sunset. So you can see this sunset picture here with the two horses. They're still saddled up. We've just arrived into camp. We hopped off the horses and I snagged that picture. So it's just beautiful.
Klein, we have a quick question. Are the
Yeah,
Marwari
sure.
horses taller?
Yeah, they're a little taller. They're not huge though. They're not like warm bloods or thoroughbreds. They're going to top out generally around 16 hands. So 15, 16 hands in that range. So a little bit taller than the Icelandic horses, but they're not giants for sure. Yeah, good question. This is just a sampling of some of the other accommodations that we stay in on this trip. When we're not staying in the tent camps, we're staying in really nice hotels. Really lovely, quaint and interesting hotels. They're not the Holiday Inns of India. They're the old, a lot of character to them. So that's just a few images from those hotels. And sitting here on the pink bench, if you can see, that's one of our guides from India, Neha, who's wonderful. All right, so I'm going to pass it over now to Helen, who is going to share a little bit more about the trip in Mongolia, which I have yet to do, but Helen has done. So,
Thanks,
and
Caroline.
I hope we got your sound. Oh, good, your sound is working. Great.
Well, I think that was more luck than good management. Oh, my sound. So I've been to Mongolia twice, and the first time I went as a client on the Orkhon Valley ride. Really, culturally, it's fantastic. I can't say enough about it. It's to go to Mongolia is worth the effort. It's it's a long way to get there, and the culture it's a really interesting culture once you get there and learn about specifically their horse culture. The Przewalski's horse, the original prehistoric horse, you can see there in one of the parks, is the ancestor of all the Mongolian horses. They're very small. They're 13 to 14 to 15 hands would be really a large one. I had to ride, I'm used to riding a large horse, and I rode them very comfortably. They're strong. I helped plan this trip, and I met Sabine, who is our partner, and she has crafted the most beautiful Western saddles. So on this particular trip, we're really pleased to offer really comfortable tack. They're Western, handmade Western saddles. They're well broken in. And so, some of the other trips, it was problematic because of very difficult saddles. So we don't have that problem anymore. It's been remedied. These horses also are used to being groomed. Some of the ones that I was around, they told us not to touch them or groom them. In fact, they preferred to hold them when we got off in case we were to hit an elbow or skim a butt when we were getting our leg over or something. The horses were spooky. In general, Mongolian horses are pretty wild. They spend 10 months of the year, 9 months of the year, really fending for themselves. Summer's a very short season, and they're turned out for the winter, and you have to paw to get grass and have to break ice to get water. Some of the differences that were hard for people from North America or from our world to see were that the horses don't have access to hay and water during the day. And I just want to give everybody a heads up. That's normal. That's been going on for thousands of years there. And we had some interesting sort of cross-cultural exchanges about that. They have herds of horses, and usually they'll go out and just catch some during the day, bring the ones in that they want. And often they stay tacked up all day and drink from rivers, and they're allowed to graze with the tack on, and they'll be let loose to graze in that beautiful steppe overnight. So it's different. There's no stalls, there's no hay storage. It's really different. And you have to be ready for that. Sabine is German, so she does bring with her certain, medical things like regular deworming and that kind of stuff. So, and improved feeding, so that you'll see the horses on this ride are in really good condition. That's always a worry for people that are coming from away, is that they don't want to ride horses that are not in great condition. It's funny, they don't have the cues, for example, whoa, or it's almost like you just get on and go. We're not going to be doing dressage. You get on and away you go. There's no special gait like a tolt, but there is a really fast trot, like, so a lot of people stood up for that trot. It's kind of hard to post.
I do have a short video, Helen, too,
great.
if you want me to play it. Now, the problem, I also don't have sound on this video, but we'll get at least some of the images. All right.
Great.
Shall I go ahead and play it?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
Love that little trot.
We can also link this video to the follow-up email so that everyone can rewatch that again with sound. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
You do cover a lot of miles. Usually the trips have a long day in the saddle. I didn't do this particular trip, but I did want to mention that if for anybody that wants to go, I would certainly consider adding on a day or two in Ulaanbaatar. There's a black market that's absolutely fascinating and has a lot of handmade tack that's unique. There's some wonderful monasteries and temples to visit. So I'll leave it now. I won't take up more time, but I look forward to questions at the end.
So we covered, I think we covered all of this.
Okay.
And just a few more images here. And the horses are, again, like all colors and really cute.
The one in the foreground looks a lot like the Przewalski horse. It would be worth looking that up if you're interested in the trip. The accommodations, the yurts are just beautifully decorated. It's really, really interesting. They have wood stoves, and they'll start the wood stoves for you in the evening just to take the chill off. They'll bring you hot water morning and night, sometimes some little appetizers to your room. They may not be appetizers you recognize, but like yak cheese is one of them. And it's just, there's a lot of cultural things you'll learn when you're there. you're supposed to move around the yurt a certain way. It goes in the direction from the children around to the married couple. And so there's just a lot of really nice cultural things to learn while you're there.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a really big part of the trip, Helen, is that you get to kind of be right immersed in the culture.
That's
And
right.
I would say that the very same is true of India. You're very much immersed in the culture in India, and also with Peru. And I'm going to talk about Peru next. And yes, you have a question
Sorry,
there?
we just had one quick question back to Mongolia for a second. Will there be yurts for the whole trip?
Good
No.
question.
On that Gorkha Terrace ride, there are some nights tenting.
Yeah, so if I go back a couple of slides here, you can actually see the bottom right here, there's a tent. So there are nights where you're staying in tents where you'll be putting up your own tents, and there'll be nights where you're staying in those beautiful yurts that we saw. So you get a little bit of variety.
Another question about the Mongolian horses. Have they all been ridden before? And there may have been a rider, they won't be the rider for the first time?
Oh, no, they've all been ridden before. The ones for tourists are very carefully selected.
Yeah, I think earlier you said the horses are quite wild there, but what I understand is that for our tours, the horses are different. They're not like the ones that are wild.
Yes,
Yeah.
Sabine and Keith have really worked hard on these horses so that they can be touched and groomed. The other trip that I went on, they advised us not to because they had a quick kick out. But even on the other trip, the horses were used to tourists. They're just not the same as we're used to. And they'll tell you all of that when you get there.
Yeah, great.
And can you quickly just go over the actual riding skill level for the Mongolian horse trip?
So novice to intermediate, which means, again, as Carolyn said, you don't want to be a total beginner. These horses will be Western style, so you'll be neck reining. If you want to canter, Sabine said you can break off and have some small canters, and if the whole group wants to canter, there are some longer canters as well. But when we say novice, you can go if you've done trot, if you're comfortable in open country. Some people are only comfortable in a ring. So if you're comfortable trail riding and being in open country at a walk and a trot, and then once you get the feel of it and you get to know your horse, you might try a little bit of canter. So, it's definitely accessible to novice.
Yeah, great. Whereas the trip that we were running before in Mongolia was not at all for novices. So this is a little bit different that way. So if you had been thinking about the previous Mongolia trip, this one is different, and it is a little more accessible. All right, the Sacred Ride in Peru, and again, I was very fortunate to be on this trip this year, and it is another real cultural immersion trip. You're really getting a feel for Peru and the Peruvian people. There's a lot of history in Peru and a lot of Inca sites that we visit along the way as well. So this is one of the more beautiful trails. They're all so beautiful, actually. I can't say one is more beautiful than the other, but this is an absolutely stunning area of the trip where we're kind of going through the mountains. And this is a mountain trip. It is at altitude. So you start in Cusco City, which is, I don't have a picture of it here, but Cusco City is at 11,500 feet. So that's quite high. And we go a little bit lower on the trip and we go a little bit higher. We try to make it work for acclimatization along the way. We're always checking in with blood oxygen levels and making sure everybody is doing well with the altitude. But we are up there, so it's beautiful because of that. You can see here this picture on the left. We're going through one of the towns that we stay in, Oyote Tambo, and we go through town. It's very exciting. Everyone's really happy and excited to see us as we go through. The middle picture at the top is one of the villages that we stay in. It's, I think, the highest point in our trip. It's very remote. They didn't have, I'm not sure if they still have no car access, but if they do, it's only very recent. And They don't have, I don't even think there's cell phone service up there, but they have these beautiful little huts. We learned how to make the grass roofs while we were there. And when we showed up, they dressed us in their in their um, in their traditional attire, and it's very warm. It's quite cold up in the mountains, so they put these colorful wool clothing on us and hats, and we really got to feel like we were part of it. And in this particular village, I had my ukulele with me, and we had all the little kids singing and playing with us. It was just a lot of fun. You can see on the bottom right, the villagers would line up along the road to welcome us when we come into the villages. And the top picture, of course, is Machu Picchu on the right there. So we do a tour the last day to Machu Picchu to get to see that. And I've had people ask, do we have to hike to Machu Picchu? No, we take the bus and we take the train, and we just walk around the site. So there's no real hiking on this trip per se. It's just the walk around, and we do a couple of other ruins on the trip as well. And again, we're just walking around those ruins. We visit a women's weaving cooperative, which is the bottom picture in the middle, and we get to see how they dye the yarn and how they make the products. And I actually bought a beautiful sweater from there, and most of the ladies did buy some of the beautiful woven things that they made there. And the nice thing about this is that the money is all going back to the women who are doing the work, right? It's not being sold off cheap in some market somewhere, and the women aren't getting the money for it. They're actually getting the proceeds from their own work. And most of the places we went through, the women would open up these blankets and have all of these beautiful textiles and different things to sell. So having a few dollars, American dollars, usually works fine. There is handy, because you never know when you're gonna have something beautiful in the middle of nowhere to purchase. Here are some scenes from the riding. So the riding is it's not going to be fast the way that the India is, or some of the options in Iceland or Mongolia, because we're in the mountains, and you can see that the terrain can be quite steep, it can be quite rocky, and so we're not generally going over a walk, we're just walking through. We go through villages, through the mountains. Occasionally there's an opportunity to trot when there's a nice flat spot, like perhaps on that road that you see on the right side of the screen. But in general, you're just at a walk. The challenge in the riding for this trip is that you have to keep your balance as you're going up and down some steep sections of trail. And for some people, there's a little bit of a fear factor, but you're never that close to the edge. And the horses really know their job. They are so sure-footed, and they're fantastic. The top left is one of the mules. So you could be riding a Peruvian Paso horse or a mule. And so again, we've rated this as a novice, but anyone can do it and enjoy it. And if you're a more experienced rider, then you'll likely be paired up with a more experienced, or a horse that will require a little bit more from you. And so you can get a little bit of a challenge that way. So we say, comfortable at a walk trot, but you don't necessarily need to be comfortable at a canter, because we're not really doing that. Now, being able to control your horse when we're going through environments where they might be distracted, like through a town, that's a good skill to have as well. So if you've done some riding outside of an arena, you've done some trail riding, that's really good preparation for this trip. We're riding for about 4 to 6 hours a day. We do take breaks always on all of the trips, but also the fitness level needs to be a little bit more because of being at altitude, right? So you want to, and we're not climbing or hiking, but you want to make sure that that your breath fitness is pretty good. So the riding style is Western. It's some of the saddles are your traditional Western saddle that have a horn on the front. Some just sort of have a big fender on the front that give you that secure feeling of being in the saddle. They're quite comfortable, and they do feel very secure. They've got that deep seat so that you're not going to slide off when you're going uphill or downhill. And they're Peruvian pasos, so they're gaited horses. They have a very smooth kind of running walk, or mules. You might be riding a mule on that trip as well. So some of these pictures are accommodations, some are actually lunch spots. So the top left, we don't stay in that really rustic looking building. It's one of the places that we stop for lunch, and it is spectacular. It's on a lake, and it is really beautiful and extremely remote. So where they came up with the food to feed us this incredibly gorgeous lunch, I'm not sure, but it was all local. And it was incredible and delicious. You'll see a couple of the tent accommodations. We do some glamping on this trip. We stay in boutique hotels, and I don't have any pictures of you up for you of the accommodations that we stay in the villages, except if I go back here. This middle top picture where I showed you these buildings with the grass roofs, those are actually our accommodations. So in the one that's furthest on the left, there's 3 different rooms or 4 different rooms, and there are 2 beds and a bathroom inside the room. And most of our village stays, we stay in 3 different villages. We're in double rooms with bathrooms inside the room. There is one village where we're billeted out to different places, and the bathroom may or may not be inside your room in that place. So just depending on where you get your accommodations that night. But they're rustic, but they're comfortable. They're very basic, but you get this feeling that you're really with the people. You're in the village and you're eating around the table with them, and you're staying, right in the building right beside their house. So it's quite spectacular. All right. Yes, question, Julia.
Thanks, Clan. Would you like to quickly mention about the situation in Peru right now? We've had a couple questions come through.
Yeah, absolutely. So as some of you might know, the political situation in Peru is up in the air right now. Things are not great. And we are watching that really closely, keeping an eye on it. And if we cancel any of our trips because of the situation, then there's no penalty to you. So you can book a trip with that confidence. And all I can say is we're watching, we're keeping an eye on it. We're hoping that it's not going to last forever, of course. And if it isn't safe, we will not be sending trips there, right? We will only be sending trips if things are settled and feel good to us to do so. But so we will just have to keep an eye on it and let you know as the trips come closer.
And at this time, all of our trips to Peru are still running as planned.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thanks. All right, so just to mention some of the other trips that we are offering right now, we have Horsing Around the Highlands, which is in Scotland. It is an intermediate trip, so you're going to be galloping and cantering. Galloping is optional, but you're going to be cantering on that trip. There's lots of options to gallop on the beach there. There's a great opportunity to go swimming with the horses there, and that's great fun. We stripped down to our underwear, took off the saddles, and a bunch of wild women swimming around in the horses in the ocean. And the nice thing about horses is they're very warm. They shed a lot of heat, so you're not feeling the cold of the North Atlantic. And lots of variety on that trip, lots of beach rides, a couple of beach rides. As you can see here, this is through sort of the hills around the farm where we stay. The unique thing about this trip is we stay in one place. We go back to the same really comfortable, cozy farm with a little wood stove every day, so you can dry out your clothes, because it is Scotland, so it's not unlikely that it would rain. But that's a lovely trip. That's a new one for us this year. The Azores Horse, Whale, and Volcano Tour is, as I said earlier, it's in Portugal, but it's not on mainland Portugal. It's on the islands. They're almost halfway back to North America, actually. And there's a few days of riding. You're riding Lusitano horses on this trip, which are amazing movers. They're just really incredible. They're bigger horses, usually around 16 hands. They're not massive, but they are bigger than some of the other horses that we ride. And they're just lovely. They move so nicely. Nice trot, nice canter. We on that trip it's novice intermediate. So if you're not as experienced, you can go. We'll split the group for those who want to canter. We'll have lots of opportunities to canter on that trip. Lots of really nice smooth paths to ride on. And then you also have a day of whale watching. And there's a day on a neighboring island. So the Azores are a group of islands. So the neighboring island, you can see it right from Fayal. It's called Pico, and you go and do a tour there for the day. And then there's a day where you do some hiking around the rim of a really cool volcano. So all these islands are formed by volcanoes. So you see a lot of old volcano activity there as well. It's really neat. Banff backcountry riding in Canada. It's another Western mountain trip. This one is our most beginner friendly trip. Like I said, we don't recommend that you've never been on a horse and you go on a horse trip, but if you have very minimal experience, this is the trip for you. You can get on, the horse knows its job impeccably. It walks up that mountain, it takes you up, and you stay in 2 different really beautiful remote lodges on this trip. So a night in Sundance Lodge, and then you ride up to Halfway Lodge, and you spend 3 nights there, and then you do some hiking and a day ride up to one of the high passes on the days that you're staying up at Halfway Lodge. Then you ride back to Sundance Lodge and then back to Banff, and it's stunning. We ran into a whole bunch of snow in June up in the high pass, so that was really exciting to see, and the horses are incredible. Again, the biggest challenge in the riding here is the balance, because you're going to be on some steep sections. So if you haven't done a lot of riding on steep sections, then you want to really have a good core, because you're going to have to lean back to get down the hill and support the horse and use your stomach muscles to do that. But it's absolutely spectacular. And then the Connemara riding adventure in Ireland is another lovely trip. It is on the on the west coast of Ireland, Galway area. And there's 2 locations. So there's 3 nights in one location up near Galway, and then 3 nights a little further south near Clifton. And the riding is really varied. It's not as much riding as some of the other trips. So you might ride for 2 or 3 hours in a day, and then maybe go to the marble factory or go to a garden, or visit the town, or maybe go to a pub. So there's a lot of different activities, and there's always something new and interesting going on that trip. And there's opportunities to canter and gallop on the beach as well. This is a trip that we say novice to intermediate, but you want to be a fairly competent rider when you're riding along the roadway. You want to be able to keep your horse to the side and just know that you have control of your horse when there's distractions around. There's some riding along the road. On most of the trips, there's some riding on the road, actually. Lots of riding on trails and beaches. And this, where we're just going along the coast trail here, is really beautiful in Ireland. So lots of different variety on that trip. So where does that take us? So what to pack? I changed these slides earlier today. So I show a progression of packing here. So this is everything I took to India this year, actually. And I usually take these pictures of my stuff when I'm packing, just to kind of share on Facebook. So if there's a trip that you are thinking about, if you can search on the Facebook page, and you'll see all the posts that I've done from those trips. You'll see what I've packed on those trips often. But here you can see on the left, everything. So I've got half chaps. If you look to the right side, it's more of my riding stuff. So the half chaps are there, my helmet, my gloves. I do recommend that you take your own helmet on a riding trip. Most of our partners, except in India, will provide helmets, but if everybody shows up without a helmet and you all have large heads, you may not get the helmet that's going to fit your head properly. You also don't know how many times those helmets have been dropped on the ground, right? So for your own noggin's protection, I would take your own, and a pair of gloves is handy. as well. I always ride with a camelback when I'm on trips. You'll see the gray thing there. It's like a little backpack, and it's got a water bladder in it and then a hose that comes over my shoulder. This particular one is called the bootlegger, and it is super low profile. It's made to be worn under your clothes. You don't want a backpack at all on any horse trip. A waist bag is usually okay, but a backpack, because it's going to be bouncing around on your back, and it has straps that can get caught, you know, say on the horn of the saddle if you fall off. So you want to make sure. So I wear it underneath my jacket usually, or underneath my shirt, so that nothing's going to get caught on the tack. And I know I drink a whole lot more when I got the hose, and I can just drink rather than having to open my saddle bag. And, you know, I can be literally cantering along and taking a drink if I'm thirsty. So I find that really handy. That's my personal preference, because it's entirely up to you. And then a good pair of breeches. And my breeches are actually not in this picture because I had intended to wear them on the plane. But I usually just take one pair on a horse trip. Even if I'm doing a couple of trips back to back, I still only take one pair. Lots of people like to have two. I take my chances. If they get wet, I'll dry them out at night. It's not a bad idea to have two pairs, but I try to pack for carry-on only. So if you see on the right side, you can see I have a bigger backpack, a smaller backpack. One goes under the seat in the plane, the other is in the overhead. My helmet is even in that red backpack. So I put it all into if you look in the middle, into these packing cubes, so everything's compressed really tight, and I carry it all with me. Now, that's totally your preference, right? Not everyone wants to have a backpack. You can have a roller bag, you can check a bag if you want, but I would say, you know, because right now things are going missing, luggage more than usual, to make sure you have your essentials in your carry-on. Like, you want to wear your boots, you want to have your breeches with you, your helmet with you, your gloves with you, a change of clothes, you know, maybe an extra pair of underwear too, like that. So just in case, I would have those things with me at all times. All right. So we are to the point where I would love to invite your questions, and I'm sure that some have been coming in as we've been going, Julia. So Helen and I can answer whatever you got.
All right, we've got lots of questions coming through. So I'm going to go through what we can, and we may go over time depending, but anything that we don't get to, please, everyone, be advised, we will get back to you, whether it's by email, phone call. We will try to get back to you as soon as we can. So the first question is, what is the average size of the group?
That varies trip to trip. So I think the largest group would be 14 on the Golden Circle, and I think it's around 8 would be the smallest group. So you're looking kind of in that range.
Great. What footwear do you recommend?
Good question. I'm going to go back to my packing slide, and are my boots there? Yes, so top right picture, you'll see a pair of really well-worn boots. Those are called, they're by a company called Ariat, and they're called Terrain or All Terrain, I think. I can't remember exactly. Do you know, Helen, is it Terrain?
Terrain.
Yeah. Terrain, yeah. So I really like these boots because they look like a hiking boot and they lace up like a hiking boot, so you can get really nice and snug in them. You can't see from this picture, but they do have a little heel, and a heel is an important part of a riding boot because it stops your foot from sliding through the stirrups. That said, in Banff, I believe, and in Peru, the stirrups are covered, so your foot doesn't go through. So hiking boots are okay on those trips, but other trips, I would recommend that you have a little heel on your boot. A lot of people wear Blundstones. Those are very popular for riding. And some people like to wear the taller boots. Oh gosh, what's the name? Dewberry is the expensive brand. Galway, I think, is the sort of moderate brand. But they're a taller boots that are waterproof leather with Gore-Tex, and I have a pair of those, and they're lovely for riding into. They're great for rainy, cooler, rainier places. Yeah, but that's what I'd recommend for footwear, and then whatever's comfortable, right? It's got to be comfortable.
Perfect. Who saddles and unsaddles the horses? Do we have to do our own?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So again, it depends on the trip. So in Iceland, you are saddling and unsaddling your own horse. You're doing it all. And I'm trying to think, on every other trip, I think it's done for you. Oh no, that's not true. In Ireland, we did tack up our own horses, and in Scotland, we also tacked up our own horses. In India, we did not. In Peru, we did not. In Mongolia, you're not tacking up your own horse. No, so it's a little half and half. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have one. They would love to find a trip where the horses are very smooth or gated. Which trip would be best?
Yeah, I would say Iceland. You probably get the smoothest ride in Iceland. But the horses are gated in Peru as well. And I don't think the Mongolian horses are gated, are they, Helen? No, they looked like they were doing a choppy little trot there. Yeah.
Pony trot.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a smooth ride, Iceland is your best bet. They're probably, out of all the trips, the smoothest.
Perfect. For the Mongolia trip, what is the bathroom situation?
Again, it can be, if you're camping, hand dug latrine. For the yurts, they usually have their pit toilet with boards that you put your feet on. It's very primitive. The bathroom situation in Mongolia is quite primitive. They bring the hot water to your yurt for bathing. And I don't think, I think, as far as showers, they're not going to provide, the heated shower bags that sometimes. So there were 2 yurt camps that I stayed in that did have showers, but I'm not sure about Princess Park.
Okay, perfect. I heard Mongolia is not necessarily safe for women. Is this true?
You're totally looked after on the ride. There's no concern about safety at all. You're just helped from the time you get there. You're transferred, you're picked up, you're transferred to a hotel, you have a nice debriefing with your group, and are taken to a restaurant, and you will be looked after. There's no safety worry at all.
Beautiful. And how long would they be in the saddle each day for Mongolia?
4 to 5 hours with some trotting. More trotting than Peru.
Okay. And for each of the trips, do they have the same horses for the whole trip?
What a great question.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. On every trip, yes, except the Golden Circle in Iceland. On that trip, you're going to ride 2 horses each day, 2 different horses. And it's actually fantastic, because it means that we switch the horses in and out, and some of them get a break. They go ponied, so the guides will pony the horses along, the extra horses. And if you get a horse that you don't particularly like, you only have to ride it half a day. If you get a horse that you really like, you can always request to ride it again. And we will, on the beach day, the last day, always make sure you get one of your 3 favorite horses for at least half of that day or part of that day. So you'll always get to ride your favorites again. But you do get to ride a whole bunch of different horses. And there's good and bad to both. Riding the same horse for the whole week is wonderful. If you love the horse and you get along with it, you can really make a nice bond with that horse. But riding different horses makes you a better rider. You learn so much from each horse, and you get to know so many different horses, and your skill level will go up so much just trying to figure out how to get each different Icelandic horse to talk, because they're not all exactly the same. But yeah, mostly you're staying with the same horse except Iceland.
Okay, great. Sorry, there's just so many questions. I'm kind of just scrolling through. I had one. Can you speak to the safety equipment that's provided or not provided on trip? Helmets, vests?
Yeah, so helmets are provided on most trips, like I said, except for India. You have to bring your own to India. Other than that, no. If you want to wear a vest, you can certainly bring a vest and wear it, but there are no vests provided. And again, like the helmets provided, I would always prefer to have my own, just because you just don't know what's happened to that helmet.
What is the experience level for the Peru trip?
That's a novice. We call it novice. You don't have to be a really experienced intermediate type rider, but you shouldn't be a beginner.
Okay. Is the Peru trip similar to the Banff trip in terms of the mountain trail?
No. The Banff Trail is much more established route. It's a wide trail for most of it. Some of it is a narrower trail through the woods, but there's a lot of it that's just a wide trail, and it's very established. Where in Peru, we had to, have one of the local guides take us over the mountain pass, because there's so many different ways you could go, and it's vast and open. So it's not particularly similar, no.
What happens if someone gets sick or is not feeling well on trip?
Yeah, it really depends on, what the issue is. So most of the trips, I'm trying to think, maybe even all of the trips, there's some kind of support with a vehicle. So you can always go with the vehicle if you don't want to ride that day. If it's, it really depends. Like if you're really sick, then we'll get you to the hospital if need be. But yeah, you can usually ride in a vehicle and not ride your horse and just take a break for the day.
If you book as a single, do you get a roommate?
Mm-hmm. You sure do. You get to meet all kinds of new people. Yeah. Some of the trips might have, the ability to pay a little extra and get a single room, but not all of the trips. But one of the beautiful things about traveling with other people is getting to know them, and having someone to stay up and share stories with at night.
What breed of horses are used for the horsing around the Highlands trip?
Oh, they have all kinds of different horses there. There was a thoroughbred, there's some draft crosses for the larger riders. They have gypsy vanners. There was, oh gosh, yeah, a whole variety. They look for the best horses to do the job, and it doesn't matter what breed they are. So they're yeah. And in Ireland, they're mostly Connemara's and Irish draft mixes, but yeah. But in Scotland, they could be anything.
Awesome. For the Azores, we have quite a few questions, but I'm just going to pick a few. How much riding is there for this trip?
Yeah, there's 3 days, so it's a six sort of full days of the trip, and 3 of the days are riding. And then there's a day where you're doing the tour of the neighboring island. There's the day where you're doing the whale watching and a tour of Horta, which is close to where we stay. And then there's a day where you're doing the walk around the rim of the volcano crater.
And what happens if there is no whale watching or the weather doesn't permit?
Yeah, then they would have to come up with some other activity. But unfortunately, yeah, we can't control the weather. We can't control whether whales are actually going to be present to be watched on the whale watching. Yeah, so it may be spending a little longer in town, or doing some activity back at that's another trip where we stay at the same place for the whole time. Helen, yeah.
They did say when I originally talked to them about planning that ride that they could substitute it if there was a known weather event such as waves or wind, that they could switch out a whale watching and a riding day.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had pretty good weather when I was there. We had some rain and it was pretty mucky at times, but for the most part, most of the things you can do no matter what the weather is, but some things, like if the sea is really rough, there's no point in going whale watching. So it would make sense that you could switch days. Yeah.
And will we be offering this in 2024?
I don't know.
Really? So,
I don't know. I think the plan is to offer in 2024, but we are always looking at what we're offering and what, you know, the value and the costs and all of that, and what you tell us you want and what people sign up for. So I think we're going to do it in 2024, but I can't promise you 100%.
Okay. Okay. Is there a weight limitation on these trips? Some horses seem quite small.
Yeah, really good question. Believe it or not, Icelandic horses, even though they're really small, they're super strong and they're stocky. And the weight limit on that is 220 pounds. The weight limits range a little bit. Usually it's around 200 to 220. The Scotland trip, they ask you to be under 195. That's their standard. So yeah, but they're all in that range from 195 to 220. Now, if someone is a little heavier, but they're tall, and so you know they're not, their weight is distributed, and they're an experienced rider, right? That makes a big difference. We might be able to go over that weight limit a little bit. So an inexperienced, heavier rider is going to be very hard on the horse's back. It's going to be very heavy and very bouncy for the horse, and it's not going to be comfortable for either. So those weight limits are really for safety of both the rider and the horse.
Perfect. And then for all trips, do you mount from the ground unassisted?
No, no. Some of the trips we do, you never have to be completely unassisted. You can always find a rock or higher ground. You can always ask someone to, you know, hold the stirrup down on the other side so the saddle doesn't slip. You can always ask someone to give you a leg up. So you never are really completely unassisted, but there's not mounting blocks out there either, except in Banff. Everywhere we stopped in Banff, they had a mounting block. So when we stopped for lunch, there was a mounting block to get back on. But mostly you are mounting from the ground or from a rock, or, you know, from someone's knee or whatever it takes to get you on the horse. But we won't leave without you on the horse.
Awesome. And then do all trips have saddlebags?
Sorry, I'm just stopping the share of the screen. We didn't need to look at all my packing stuff. Do all the trips have saddlebags? I think so. But the ones in the Azores are super small. Like they can fit a water bottle that's about this big. They're weird. They go across the front of the saddle, and they're just little pouches about kind of that big. So lip balm, phone, a tiny water bottle, and I think they even gave us the water bottles that fit on that trip. But the other trips, I think they do. I'm not sure about Mongolia. Do you know about that?
Mongolia doesn't have saddlebags. They basically, you could roll up a coat and tie it at the back, but the horses are so small that usually we would just use belly pack, a waist pack, to put Kleenex, whatever, sunscreen and so on, little bottle of water.
Yeah.
So they provided the water on our breaks, that we were van supported. So I'm not sure what the camping ride does.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I always have my Camelback and it saves me.
Okay, I'm cognizant of time. We are over, but I have just one last question, and then we will sign off for the evening. Can we accommodate vegetarians, gluten-free? Can we have a little quick chat about that?
Yeah, I think on every trip every horse trip, I'm not sure about Mongolia, but in India we were able to. In Iceland, it's very easy. Peru, it's a little more challenging because we are staying in some of the more remote places, but we were still able to easily accommodate a vegetarian as in any way. I don't think gluten would be a big issue. Yeah, I think that for all of the trips,
it's on our sort of when we're finding partners, it's one of the requirements.
Mm,
that they can
Okay.
provide for people with different dietary
yeah,
requirements.
yeah. Yeah, they're generally very good.
Very
Very
good.
good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Klein. Thank you, Helen, both for your time tonight. We have 82 more open questions, so we're going to have to cut it for the evening. But just a reminder to everyone, this webinar is being recorded, so we will send out the recording to anyone who had signed up, and we will post it to our Facebook page as well. We will try to get back to everyone with all of their questions individually, so that we can answer everything that you have on your mind to make sure that you pick the right trip for you and that you enjoy the trip that you go on. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Julie.
Klein.
So
Thank you,
much.
Helen.
Good night. Bye.